Everyone knows that paranoia sells, and Rupert Murdoch's Faux Enterprises likes to scare the shit out of its viewers for fun and profit, if there's good money to be made from it, especially when it's got skin in the game. But this time, the political stakes are much fucking higher than usual, and America's future as a democracy is on the goddamn line. Now witness the obsessive preoccupation at Faux, or as people like to call it Fox, but it's actually pronounced Faux, with the Great Replacement Theory. It's hyping such a transparently fabricated existential crisis to its targeted demographic. That is mostly the older white males, and it was purposely intended to raise a doomsday anxiety level in a gullible audience, the sort of viewers long conditioned to interpret events in a conspiratorial framework. Now, following the twisted path of this racist creation myth to its origins reveals a provenance that stretches well beyond that piece of shit Tucker Carlson's nightly pitch to his inbred sycophants, many of whom share a collective fear that the traditional barriers intended to keep certain groups of others outside and out of sight are no longer working as expected. Um, Foe was running in a crowded field of competitors in the faux paranoid theme park that's been ginning up over the years. Hanging with the deeply weird array of QAnon rubes, white supremacists, fake Christians, Trumpian deadbeats, and similarly motivated co-conspirators, all of them working overtime to push an agenda of racist fear and animus. One tragic consequence of the deadly stimulus project recently played out in a Buffalo supermarket. Now, still, for all its high-volume flailing, the faux hype machine is mostly amateur stuff, a perverse riff on Donald Trump's side hustle con involving an American wall, one that promised his inbred cult of maggot pawns to keep the threatening hordes of invasive species permanently excluded on the other side. At root, it's a protocol for ensuring dominance and control of the public spaces that define every element of American culture. More ominously, in the short term, it's also a mobilizing electoral strategy now fully embraced by one of the two major American political parties. Now, for a guided tour of this paranoid mindset from a true connoisseur of the art of cynical manipulation, and though one needs to turn to Franz Kafka, whose story was The Great Wall of China, and it was written back in 1917, and it offers prescient psychological insights into the storyline being performed on the piece of shit Tucker Carlson show any night of the fucking week. Against whom was the Great Wall to provide protection? Kafka asked, adding that there were no genuine threats besides the terrifying portraits in the books of the ancient people, which served the emperor's purposes by conjuring up atrocities that were committed by malicious outsiders, enemies whose sharp-pointed teeth will crush and rip to pieces the peaceful citizens living beyond the Great Wall. When children are bad, we hold up these pictures in front of them. Kafka wrote in his century-old warning memo to us, and they immediately burst into tears and ran into our arms. Franz Kafka, meet the piece of shit Tucker and friends. Joining the reception line are a coterie of like-minded race-baiting provocators and conspiracy mongers that were littered throughout the cable news show and the darker social media corners of the internet. Now, replacement theorizing, along with its kissing cousin critical race theory, another imaginary playmate at Faux, offers a useful platform from this loose confederation of the proto-fascist trolls to practice their specialized craft, setting up a target-rich environment of black people, Jews, Muslims, the LGBTQ folk, the feminists and foreigners of all kinds, well, the non-European ones anyway. Now think of their nihilistic search and destroy mission as a Kafkaesque effort to discover the hidden enemies. Even the imaginary ones will do. In a pinch, who can be portrayed as mortal threats to the fragile fantasy world at the core of white supremacist self-deluding ideology. Now, granted, the more respectable the members of this confederacy may suffer, the brief moments of panic when one of the unhinged followers becomes a break-in news story, as when it turned out that the alleged Buffalo shooter's 180-page manifesto acknowledged that the bloody rage killings were live-streamed online as a self-promoting act of terrorism, a fantastical infomercial intended to prevent white people from succumbing to an imaginary replacement theory. But put another way, when a lethal mode of performance art seizes control of the public stage, demanding that attention be paid to its incoherent rhetoric of virulent hate, Faux gets as nervous as the Wizard of Oz right before Dorothy's little dog Total pulls pulls back the curtain on the sad old man working the gears. Now, Rupert Murdoch's media magic quickly loses its persuasive charms if folks get too close to a look at the inner workings of the cynical manipulation machinery. Now, following Buffalo, the unanticipated exposure of the machine source code may explain the peak hysteria coming from the primetime players at Faux, who have frantically scrambled to deny that they share any responsibility for inspiring and inflaming one of their crazy viewers to violently act on his paranoid fantasies about the replacement theory. And fucking goodness, who knows where he might have been, where he might have picked up that nonsense. Of course, they're trying to claim it was Antifa, which it wasn't. Arguably, the Trump-organized mob actions of January 6, 2021, performed live on the steps of the U.S. Capitol as a theoretical rehearsal for fascism, different in terms of the number of actors taking part in the patriotic cosplay drama, and the body count at the end of the day. Nonetheless, that staged event was produced and directed with essentially the same motivational goals as the alleged Buffalo shooter. Now, capture the attention of an aggrieved audience. Now, play upon their sense of resentment and victimhood. Engage them in the urgent talk of redeeming the country from their godless enemies. Justify the use of violence as a legitimate political discourse in the service of an imaginary version of our America. Despite such temporary program interruptions, things at Faux quickly settled back down to a normal daily routine of partisan demagoguery and fear-mongering, though carefully recoded just enough to allow for some degree of plausible deniability, at least until the next mass shooting or perhaps a seditious insurrection breaks out. We are now familiar and entering uncharted territory, a place far beyond the familiar era of the earlier forms of institutionalized racism in America. Back when segregated schools, the employment and housing discrimination, mortgage redlining, and gated communities served as more structured, that is less overtly chaotic, mechanisms for excluding certain others from participating in the public square, no less oppressive. Such exclusionary traditions seem almost quaint by contrast now that the facade has fallen, it reveals an apocalyptic vision of the new authoritarian political agenda, and it makes no pretense about its core beliefs and anti-democratic intentions, including a hair-triggered readiness for organized violence if needed. Now, years before the killing in Buffalo, an American once stood in front of other mourners in a black church and sang Amazing Grace, a poignant moment signaling what the country was then, only reluctantly coming to understand about itself, and there are no spaces left in the once shared public squares of our community, not in churches, synagogues, or mosques, not in elementary schools, classrooms, or high school corridors, not in women's health clinics, not on workplaces, not on public street corners, and now we're not even safe to go into a grocery store anymore. Now in Buffalo, a grieving black woman told a reporter on CNN about the far deeper emotional scars that the shootings left on her shattered community. "We didn't have much, and he took what was left," she said, as if speaking to the killer. Now our safe space has been infiltrated and taken from us." Now, such domestic terrorism may appear different in any form than earlier versions. Now, people often relying on the lone wolf deranged gunman mythology to distract public attention from questions of broader political accountability. Now, the logic of its embedded racist code is still rooted in the covert agenda that's motivating the white supremacist politics everywhere and it always has. But not long ago, there were lynchings that were public entertainment in certain parts of America. A shameful history still viewable online today in the hundreds of archived photos of white mobs cheerfully posing in front of the bodies of dead black men. Billie Holiday knew what she was telling a segregated America the moment she recorded "Strange Fruit," even if most white folks back in 1939 weren't ready to listen to its lyrics. Now here's part of the lyrics. "Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the roots, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees." If in the present era the Ku Klux Klan has traded in its bedsheets for military camo gear, and they morphed into the heavily militarized Proud Boys, their implicit message has just been repackaged as something that generally gets a pass from the morally flexible content standards of primetime faux news. which I don't even know how faux could be called news because they're really not. Now, Facebook and Twitter say, for example, the replacement theory. The chant of Jews will not replace us, shouted by a tiki torch carrying mob of the fascist wannabes during the 2017 Unite the Unite the Right demonstration in Charlottesville, where Donald Trump saw good people on both sides, which there really wasn't, was an early harbinger of the emerging and rebranded white nationalist movement. Freed at last from the political closet by a different sort of president or squatter, one who surely wouldn't know the words to Amazing Grace apart from a few minor setbacks, including a failed insurrection and some indictments for seditious conspiracy. It's been a bull market ever since for the replacement theory and the cynical faux con artists who peddle it 24/7. When a significant element of the political culture tolerates and even encourages a racist discourse that reduces certain groups to the status of invasive species, implying that such persons ought to be weeded out, one way or another, the shared public square in a democratic society is no longer safe for anyone. Now, stoking racial and class fears to produce a sense of paranoid resentment and faux victimhood may be an effective political technique in the short term, assuming that its practitioners simply don't care about the long-term existential sustainability of the society. But it reveals the moral cognitive blindness motivating the authoritarian impulse for power at any cost. Now, Kafka understood this sort of cynical fear-mongering when he warned us about it 100 years ago. If he could offer us some political consultation today, this might be what he would say. Paranoia does not seem to be a bug in the system that you are describing. It's quickly becoming a feature. Please stop this before you fucking destroy yourselves. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, or WW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. If you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just as little as a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way. And thanks for listening. And yeah.